Ever wonder what it takes to find your spark again when life's left you feeling like a faded snapshot? Hey there, my sweet friends. It's Eva, your 65-year-old neighbor from Eufaula, Alabama, sipping sweet tea on my creaky porch swing. I'm finally sharing this story with y'all after days of wrestling with my own heart, wondering if I'm ready to open up. These tales I tell, some are true as the Alabama sun, some I've gathered like wildflowers, and others I've spun from the threads of my own imagination. Tonight, I'm talking to you, my dear sisters, who've loved fiercely, given everything, and maybe felt a little lost along the way. So grab a comfy seat, like we're chatting in my kitchen with the crickets humming outside. This one's about a woman who rediscovered her light, and I hope it'll touch your heart like it did mine. The kitchen was quiet, save for the soft ticking of the old clock on the wall, a steady rhythm that felt like my own heartbeat these days, slow, heavy, and a little worn out. I sat at my little wooden table on Cedar Lane, Clifton, Ohio. A cup of coffee gone cold in my hands. The kind of coffee you drink more out of habit than want. Outside, the summer evening was alive with the sounds of the 4th of July. Kids laughing, firecrackers popping, the distant hum of country music floating from a neighbor's radio. The air smelled of grilled burgers and fresh-cut grass, the kind of smell that wraps you up in memories of better days. But tonight, those sounds, those smells, they felt like they belonged to someone else's life, not mine. I'm Maggie Harper, and for 62 years, I've lived my life believing that family is the heart of everything. I thought if I gave enough, loved enough, sacrificed enough, it would come back to me in gratitude, in closeness, in those moments that make a mother's heart full. But last 4th of July, standing on my son Nathan's porch in Silver Pines, I learned how wrong I'd been. That moment, under the glow of fireworks that should have felt like magic, broke something inside me, and it was the moment I decided I couldn't keep pouring myself into a cup that would never hold me back. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I'd driven over to Nathan and Lauren's house that evening, my old station wagon rattling along the tree-lined streets of Clifton, a tray of my homemade potato salad balanced on the passenger seat. I'd spent the morning slicing onions and dicing pickles, the way my mama used to, hoping it'd be a small way to fit into their fancy barbecue. Nathan had called a week earlier, his voice rushed, saying they were hosting a big 4th of July party with Lauren's parents, Charles and Evelyn Bennett, and their high society friends from Greenwich. "It's going to be a big deal, Mom," he'd said. "Lauren's dad's got some business folks coming. You'll come, right?" I'd said yes, of course. I always said yes. For 3 years, I'd been paying the mortgage on their sprawling house in Silver Pines, a place with white columns and a lakeview backyard that cost more than I could ever dream of. Every month, I wired the money from my savings, dipping into the retirement fund I'd built over 30 years as a nurse at Clifton General Hospital. I worked extra shifts, skipped lunches, patched my old sweaters instead of buying new ones, all so Nathan and Lauren could have their dream home. I told myself it was what mothers do, give everything to see their children happy. But standing on their porch that evening, I realized I'd given so much I'd lost myself along the way. The porch was lit with string lights, and through the big bay window, I could see the party in full swing. Lauren's laugh floated out, sharp and bright, as she clinked glasses with a man in a tailored suit. Nathan was there too, his arm around her, grinning like he'd won the lottery. The table was set with crystal glasses and platters of food I hadn't made. Nothing like the potato salad I'd brought. I smoothed my sundress, a faded blue thing I'd worn to every summer gathering since James, my husband, passed away. I knocked, but no one came. The music was too loud, the laughter too thick, so I stood there, clutching my tray, feeling like a stranger at my own son's door. That's when Lauren stepped out, her blonde hair swept up in a perfect bun, her white dress catching the light like something out of a magazine. She froze when she saw me, her smile tightening just enough for me to notice. "Maggie," she said, her voice polite but cool, like she was talking to a delivery person. "What are you doing here?" I swallowed, my throat dry despite the humid July air. "I brought the potato salad," I said, holding up the tray like it was proof I belonged. "Nathan said to come by for the barbecue." Lauren's eyes flicked to the tray, then back to me. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Maggie, I'm sorry, but we talked about this. It's not a good night for you to be here. My parents invited some important business folks and, well, you'd feel out of place. It's better if you sit this one out. The words hit me like a slap, but it was the way she said them, so matter of fact, like she was doing me a favor, that cut the deepest. I stood there, the tray heavy in my hands, the fireworks starting to pop in the sky behind her. Red, white, and blue sparks lit up her face, but all I could see was the truth. I wasn't wanted. Not by Lauren, not by Nathan, not by the family I'd given everything to hold together. I thought Nathan invited me, I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Lauren sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. He did, but we talked it over. It's just not the right crowd for you, Maggie. You understand, don't you? We'll have you over another time, maybe for something quieter. Like I was too small, too plain, too ordinary to fit into their glittering world. I nodded, because what else could I do? I set the potato salad on the porch railing, my hands shaking, and turned to go. Sure, Lauren, I said. I understand. But I didn't. Not really. As I walked back to my car, the fireworks booming overhead, I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. I drove home in a daze, the streets of Clifton blurring through tears I didn't let fall. The flags lining Main Street waved in the breeze, and families spilled out onto lawns, their laughter echoing like a song. I'd forgotten the words to. By the time I pulled into my driveway on Cedar Lane, the weight of it all settled in my chest, heavy as the humid air. My house was small, a little brick rancher James and I bought when we were young and full of dreams. The kitchen table was scarred from years of Nathan's homework and family dinners. The kind where we'd laugh over burned meatloaf or argue about whose turn it was to do the dishes. I sank into a chair, the potato salad forgotten in the car, and stared at the old photo on the fridge. Nathan at 5, his gap-toothed grin wide as he waved a tiny American flag at a 4th of July picnic. James was there too, his arm around me, his eyes crinkling with that quiet love I still missed every day. That was the summer of '85, when Nathan thought fireworks were magic, when I thought our family would always be unbreakable. How had we gotten here? How had my boy, the one I'd stayed up with through asthma attacks, the one I'd worked double shifts to put through college, turned into someone who let his wife send me away like I was nothing? For 3 years, I'd paid their mortgage, $2,000 a month, wired straight from my savings to their bank. I'd skipped fixing the leaky faucet in my bathroom, driven my old wagon until the tires were bald, told myself it was worth it to see Nathan happy. But happy for who? Not for me, standing on their porch like a fool, my potato salad left to wilt in the heat. I picked up the phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed Nathan's number. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice muffled by the party noise. Mom, what's up? Nathan, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I was just at your place. Lauren said. She said I shouldn't come tonight. There was a pause, the kind that tells you someone's choosing their words carefully. Yeah, Mom, I'm sorry about that. It's just a big night, you know. Lauren's dad's got these investors here, and it's kind of a business thing. We didn't want you to feel out of place. Out of place. The same words Lauren used, like they'd rehearsed it. I closed my eyes, the ticking clock louder now. Nathan, I've been paying your mortgage for 3 years. I thought that made me part of your life, not someone who'd feel out of place at your barbecue. Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke, his voice was sharp, defensive. Mom, don't make this a thing. You've helped us out and we're grateful, but this is one night. Can't you just let it go? Let it go. Like it was nothing. Like I was nothing. I felt a heat rising in me. Not anger exactly, but something deeper, something that had been buried under years of saying yes, of giving more than I had. Nathan, I said, my voice quieter now. I've given everything I've got to keep you and Lauren afloat. I've worked nights, skipped meals, put off my own dreams, and you're telling me I don't belong at your table. Mom, you're twisting this, he snapped. Nobody's saying you don't belong. It's just bad timing. Look, I've got to go. We'll talk later, okay? The line went dead before I could answer. I sat there, the phone still in my hand, the fireworks outside fading into silence. The kitchen felt too big, too empty, the walls holding memories that suddenly seemed to mock me. I thought of all the nights I'd stayed up, monitoring Nathan's breathing when he was sick, the extra shifts I'd taken to buy him his first computer, the way I'd kept going after James died, because I had to be strong for my boy. And now, here I was, alone on the 4th of July, while my son partied with people who thought I wasn't good enough. That's when it hit me, like sunlight breaking through a storm cloud. I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't keep pouring my heart, my savings, my life into a family that didn't see me. I opened my laptop, the screen casting a pale glow across the kitchen, and logged into my bank account. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, my heart pounding. The automatic transfer to Nathan's mortgage was set to go out tomorrow. 3 years of clicking confirm, of telling myself it was for love. But love isn't a one-way street, is it? I clicked cancel. The screen flashed a confirmation, and I felt a jolt, like I'd just stepped off a cliff. Part of me wanted to undo it, to call Nathan and say I'd made a mistake. But another part, the part that had been quiet for too long, whispered, "You deserve better, Maggie. You deserve to live." I leaned back in my chair, the clock still ticking, the house still quiet. Outside, a final firework burst, its light spilling through the window, painting the kitchen in shades of red and blue. I thought of that little boy in Eve waving his flag, calling fireworks magic. I thought of the woman I'd been, giving everything to keep that magic alive for him. And I wondered, for the first time in years, if I could find a spark of my own, something to light up the life I'd let fade. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Nathan would be angry, Lauren would be colder, and I'd have to face the truth about what my sacrifices had really bought me. But sitting there in the quiet of my kitchen, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that I could rebuild, replant, rediscover the woman I was before I gave her away. And maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to love Nathan without losing myself. If you're listening to my story, if you've ever felt like you've given so much there's nothing left for you, I want you to stay with me. This is the story of how I learned to stand up, to say no, to find my own light again. And I'd love to hear your story too. If you've ever had to make a hard choice to put yourself first, click that subscribe button and share it in the comments below. Let's sit together, like old friends over coffee, and talk about the moments that changed us. Because I believe, deep down, we all have a spark waiting to shine. The morning after the 4th of July, I woke to the smell of rain and the quiet of a house that felt too big for just me. My little brick rancher on Cedar Lane, Clifton, Ohio, was the same as it had always been. Scarred wooden table in the kitchen, faded curtains letting in soft grey light, a radio on the counter that hadn't played anything but static since James passed. But something inside me had shifted. Cancelling that mortgage payment for Nathan and Lauren's house in Silver Pines last night wasn't just a click on a screen. It was like pulling a thread that might unravel everything I'd stitched together for my son over 30 years. I sat at the table, a mug of Folgers warming my hands, and wondered where it had all gone wrong. I'm Maggie Harper, and if you'd asked me a year ago what my life was about, I'd have said it was about family, about Nathan, my only child, the boy I raised with every ounce of love I had. I thought love meant giving everything, even when it left you with nothing. But standing on Nathan's porch last night, turned away from his 4th of July barbecue, like I was nobody, I realized love like that can hollow you out. Today, I want to take you back, to the years I gave so much, to the moments I thought would bind us forever, and to the slow, aching truth that I'd become a stranger in my own son's life. It started long before last night, of course. I was 24 when James and I bought this house back in the late 70s, when Clifton was just a speck of a town with a diner, a hardware store, and a hospital that needed nurses like me. James was a mechanic, with hands that could fix anything and eyes that crinkled when he laughed. We'd sit on the porch swing after supper, dreaming of a big family, of filling this house with kids and noise. But life had other plans. After years of trying, we had just one child, Nathan, born in the summer of '80, a tiny thing with a mop of dark hair and a cry that could wake the neighbors. From the moment I held him, I knew I'd do anything for him. When he was diagnosed with asthma at 3, I cut my hours at Clifton General to stay home, sitting up nights with a nebulizer, counting his breaths like they were my own. I can still see him, curled up in his Superman pajamas, his little chest rising and falling, his hand clutching mine. "Mama, you won't leave, right?" he'd whisper, and I'd promise, "Never, sweetheart. I'm right here." Those nights wove us together, or so I thought, in a way nothing could break. James and I poured everything into Nathan. We drove a beat-up Chevy longer than we should have, skipped vacations, saved every penny for his future. When he showed an interest in computers, I took extra shifts to buy him a clunky old desktop, the kind that hummed like a lawnmower. When he wanted to go to coding camp one summer, James sold his father's watch to make it happen. We didn't mind. Seeing Nathan's eyes light up, hearing him talk about building video games someday, it was worth every sacrifice. But James never got to see him grow up. A heart attack took him when Nathan was 20, leaving me a widow at 42 with a mortgage to pay and a son to raise alone. I remember the evening Nathan came to me, a month after we buried James. His face drawn with grief, but his voice steady. "Mom, maybe you should sell the house," he said, sitting at this very kitchen table. "It's too big for just you, and the money could help with my tuition." His words stung like a pinprick I didn't expect. This was our home, filled with memories of James. His toolbox in the garage, the porch swing he built, the pencil marks on the doorframe where we measured Nathan's height. But I brushed it off. Nathan was hurting too, trying to be practical. "This is our home, sweetheart," I told him, keeping my voice gentle. "Your dad and I worked hard for it. Besides, where would you stay on college breaks?" "No, I'll pick up extra shifts instead." And I did. For the next 3 years, I worked 60-hour weeks at the hospital, taking the overnight shifts nobody wanted. My hands grew rough from washing them 100 times a night. My back ached from standing, but I kept going. Nathan graduated with a computer science degree, the first in our family to go to college. At the ceremony, he hugged me, his cap crooked, and said, "I did it, Mom. I couldn't have done it without you." Those words were like sunlight, warming me from the inside out. I thought they meant we'd always be close, that my sacrifices had built something lasting. Nathan got a job at a tech startup right here in Clifton, which meant he wouldn't have to leave. I was overjoyed, picturing Sunday dinners, maybe grandkids someday. I kept working at the hospital, where Dr. David Sullivan, the chief of medicine, always said I was the best nurse he had. David was a widower, kind and steady, and we'd share coffee during quiet night shifts, talking about books or the weather. But my focus was Nathan, always Nathan. Then he met Lauren Bennett. She was 26, beautiful, with a marketing job at his company and a family that owned half of Greenwich, the ritzy town next door. Her father, Charles, ran a chain of car dealerships, and her mother, Evelyn, threw charity galas that made the local paper. The first time Nathan brought her to dinner, I fussed over the table, setting out my best dishes, the ones with the little blue flowers James had picked out. I made meatloaf, hoping it'd feel homey. Lauren stepped into my living room, her heels clicking on the hardwood, her eyes scanning the faded couch, the family photos on the mantel. "Your home is quaint," she said, her smile tight, like she was trying not to breathe too deeply. "Nathan says you've lived here forever." "Yes," I said, trying to warm the air between us. "James and I bought it when we were starting out. It's not fancy, but it's full of love." She nodded, her lips pressed together. "Well, that's what matters, isn't it?" Though Nathan and I are looking at some places in Silver Pines, have you seen those new houses? They're stunning. Silver Pines was Clifton's answer to a country club, with homes that started at prices I couldn't even wrap my head around. I caught Nathan's eye, but he looked away, his cheeks pink. "Sounds lovely," I said, my voice thinner than I meant it to be. That dinner set the tone. Lauren was polite but distant, her words always carrying a little edge, like she was measuring me and finding me wanting. I tried to bridge the gap, asking about her work, offering to help with their wedding when they got engaged 6 months later. But her mother, Evelyn, took charge, booking the Greenwich Hills Club and a planner who charged more than my monthly rent. "We've got it handled, Maggie," Evelyn said at our first meeting, her voice smooth as silk. You don't need to worry about a thing. I offered to host the rehearsal dinner, thinking I could contribute something. Evelyn exchanged a glance with Lauren, then smiled. Oh, we've already booked the Ivy Room. Charles knows the owner. I see, I said, my cheeks burning. Is there anything I can do? Lauren patted my hand like I was a child. Maybe you could help with the wedding favors. That'd be sweet. I swallowed my pride and nodded. The wedding was a spectacle. 7 bridesmaids in silk gowns, ice sculptures, a band that had played for some TV star. I felt out of place in my best dress, a navy thing I'd bought on clearance. Nathan barely stopped by my table, too busy with Lauren's family. You having fun, Mom? He asked, his tie loose, his eyes bright. Of course, sweetheart, I lied. It's beautiful. He grinned, relieved. Lauren's dad's talking about bringing me into the business side of the company. Says I've got potential. That's wonderful, I said, meaning it, even as I felt him slipping further into their world, away from mine. After the honeymoon, Nathan and Lauren started house hunting. They invited me to see a place in Silver Pines, a colonial with 4 bedrooms and a gourmet kitchen. Isn't it perfect, Mom? Nathan asked, his voice full of dreams. It was beautiful, but I couldn't help wondering how they'd afford it. Nathan had a good job, but he was still paying off student loans. It's lovely, I said. But are you sure it's in your budget? Lauren's smile tightened. My parents are helping with the down payment. We've run the numbers. It'll work. What I didn't know then was that making it work would mean leaning on me. A month after they moved in, Nathan called, his voice strained. Mom, we're in a bind. The property taxes are higher than we thought, and with Lauren's car payment, could you help us out? Just $5,000 to get us through. I didn't hesitate. I withdrew the money from my savings, the little nest egg I'd hoped to use for a condo someday. Something small and easy to maintain when I retired. Nathan needed me, and that's what mattered. But it didn't stop there. Every few months he'd call with another temporary emergency. New furniture, Lauren's certifications, a broken air conditioner. Each time I dipped deeper into my savings. Each time the thank yous grew shorter, the calls less frequent. I kept telling myself it was okay. I'd raised Nathan to chase his dreams, hadn't I? But the truth was harder to face. I was becoming invisible to him, to Lauren, to the life I had helped build. Last year, I offered to help plan their 4th of July barbecue, thinking it'd be a chance to feel like family again. Lauren laughed, a quick, sharp sound. Thanks, Maggie, but we've got a catering company. My mum's handling the guest list. You don't need to worry. Don't need to worry. That's what they always said, like I was a bother, not a mother. I started noticing the little slights. Nathan forgetting my birthday. Lauren barely asking about my life. The way they'd redecorate their house with expensive things while I patched my leaking roof with tarp. I'd overhear Lauren on the phone once, during a rare visit, saying, "It's exhausting, Mom, having to include her all the time. At least she helps out financially." Helps out. Like I was a hired hand, not the woman who'd given everything to keep their lights on. Sitting at my kitchen table now, the rain tapping against the window, I felt that ache again. The one that comes from giving so much and getting so little back. I looked at the photo on the fridge, Nathan's little flag-waving smile, and wondered when I'd stopped being his mother and started being his bank. The garden out back, overgrown with weeds, stared back at me through the glass, like a mirror of my own neglected life. I'd spent so long tending to Nathan's dreams, I'd let my own wither. But last night, cancelling that payment, I'd taken a step, a small one, but a step. I didn't know what would come next, whether Nathan would call, angry or pleading, or if Lauren would turn colder still. All I knew was that I couldn't keep living like this, a shadow in my own story. I sipped my coffee, the bitterness grounding me, and thought of the fireworks from last night, how they'd lit up the sky even as my heart broke. Maybe, just maybe, there was a spark left in me too, waiting to be kindled. The rain had stopped by mid-morning, leaving Cedar Lane glistening under a pale July sun. I stood at my kitchen sink, scrubbing a pot I'd already cleaned twice, the suds bubbling like the thoughts I couldn't quiet. It had been a week since I cancelled the mortgage payment for Nathan and Lauren's house in Silver Pines. A week since I stood on their porch, turned away from their 4th of July barbecue like I was nobody. The silence from them was deafening. No calls, no texts, just the echo of Lauren's words. You'd feel out of place. I'm Maggie Harper, and I've spent 30 years believing love meant giving everything to my son. But now, with the weight of that choice lifting and the truth clawing its way out, I was starting to see what my sacrifices had really cost me. I dried my hands on a faded dish towel, the one with little daisies James picked out years ago, and glanced at the garden through the window. The weeds were still there, tangled around the old apple tree, but a few wildflowers had pushed through, stubborn and bright. They reminded me of myself, maybe, trying to bloom in a life I'd let go to seed. I was about to make another pot of coffee when my phone buzzed on the counter, the screen flashing Lauren's name. My heart skipped. Lauren never called me directly, always leaving Nathan to handle mom stuff, as she called it. I hesitated, then answered, "Maggie?" Her voice was low, urgent, like she was afraid someone might overhear. "Can we meet? I need to talk to you. In person." I frowned, gripping the phone tighter. "Is everything okay, Lauren?" "Not really." She paused, and I heard her take a shaky breath. "Can you come to the Main Street diner? Say, in an hour?" Please, Maggie, it's important." There was something in her tone, fear, maybe, or desperation, that made me say yes, even though every instinct screamed caution. "All right," I said. "I'll be there." An hour later, I pushed open the diner's door, the bell jingling above me. The air smelled of fresh coffee and warm biscuits, and the hum of conversation filled the space. Farmers talking crop prices, kids giggling over milkshakes. Main Street Diner was Clifton's heart, the kind of place where waitresses knew your order by name, and the jukebox still played Johnny Cash. I spotted Lauren in a corner booth, her blonde hair pulled back, her usual polished look replaced by a plain sweater and no makeup. She looked tired, her eyes shadowed, her fingers twisting a napkin into knots. I slid into the booth across from her, setting my purse on the cracked vinyl seat. "Lauren," I said, keeping my voice soft. "What's going on?" She didn't meet my eyes at first, just kept shredding that napkin. Then she leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maggie, I owe you an apology. A big one. But before I get to that, I need to tell you something about Nathan. Something I should have told you a long time ago." My stomach tightened, a cold dread creeping up my spine. "What about Nathan?" She took a deep breath, like she was bracing herself. "He's been gambling. Online poker, sports betting, you name it. It started small a couple years ago, but it's out of control now. The money you've been sending for the mortgage, a lot of it's gone to his bets." The words hit me like a punch, knocking the air out of me. I stared at her, my mind scrambling to make sense of it. Nathan, my Nathan, the boy who'd spent hours building model rockets, who'd hugged me so tight after his college graduation, was throwing away my savings on bets. I shook my head, my voice trembling. "Lauren, are you sure?" "Nathan's never been reckless like that. He's careful." "I wish I was wrong," she said, her eyes meeting mine now, full of something like shame. "I found out last year when our credit card got declined at a restaurant. I checked our accounts and saw dozens of transactions, poker sites, betting apps. I confronted him, and he swore he'd stop, said it was just a hobby that got out of hand. I believed him, Maggie. I was stupid enough to believe him." The diner's noise faded, the clink of dishes and chatter blurring into a dull hum. I saw flashes of the past 3 years, the urgent calls from Nathan, always with a new excuse. Property taxes, furniture, Lauren's certifications. I'd wired the money, every time, thinking I was helping them build a life. But now, picturing those dollars vanishing into some faceless website, I felt my heart crack, not just for the money, but for the boy I thought I knew. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Lauren, I've been working myself to the bone for that house. You knew and you let me keep sending money." Her face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw tears in her eyes. I was ashamed, Maggie. I didn't want my parents to find out, or my friends or anyone. My dad, he lost his father to gambling. It's the one thing he can't forgive. If he knew I married someone like that, he'd never look at me the same. So I kept quiet, hoping Nathan would fix it. But he didn't. He got worse. And when you stopped the payments last week, it all came crashing down. I leaned back, the vinyl squeaking under me, and tried to process it. The wildflowers in my garden came to mind, pushing through the weeds, but Nathan wasn't pushing through. He was sinking, and he'd pulled us all down with him. How bad is it? I asked, dreading the answer. Bad, she said, her voice breaking. The mortgage is 3 months behind, not just one like Nathan told you. We're maxed out on credit cards. He took out a new home equity loan behind my back. And last night, he came home at 3 a.m, admitted he lost another $4,000 at a casino outside town. I told him he needs help. Gamblers Anonymous, a therapist, something. He laughed, Maggie. Said he's got a system, that he'll win it all back. I closed my eyes, the weight of it pressing down on me. My savings, my retirement, my health, all poured into a black hole I didn't even know existed. I wanted to scream, to cry, to drive to Nathan's house and shake him until he saw sense. But all I could do was sit there, the smell of biscuits and coffee mocking the chaos inside me. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again, this time with a call from an unfamiliar number. I ignored it, but Lauren's eyes widened. That might be my dad, she said. He's been trying to reach you. Your dad? I frowned. Why? She looked down, her napkin now a pile of shreds. He knows about the mortgage being late. He's concerned about how it looks for our family. He might try to talk you into helping again. As if on cue, the phone buzzed again. I sighed and answered, my voice flat. Hello? Maggie? It's Charles Bennett, came the smooth, confident voice of Lauren's father. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I glanced at Lauren, who was staring at her hands. No, Charles. What can I do for you? He cleared his throat, the sound polished, like everything about him. I understand there's been a disruption with Nathan and Lauren's mortgage payments. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding, but I wanted to discuss how we might resolve this. For the sake of the family's reputation, you understand. I felt a spark of anger, sharp and hot. Reputation. That's what this was about. Not my son's gambling, not my years of sacrifice, but how it looked to their Greenwich crowd. There's no misunderstanding, Charles, I said. Keeping my voice steady. I've been paying their mortgage for 3 years, but I can't anymore. I need to take care of my own future. A pause, then a faint chuckle, like he thought I was joking. Maggie, we appreciate your help, truly. If it's a matter of finances, I'd be happy to compensate you for your trouble. Let's say we keep things as they are through the summer. Give Nathan and Lauren time to adjust. It's the considerate thing to do, don't you think? Considerate. The word grated, like sand in a wound. I pictured Charles in his tailored suit, sitting in his office with framed photos of his car dealerships, never once inviting me to his home in all the years Nathan and Lauren had been married. Charles, I said, my voice firmer now, if you're worried about Nathan and Lauren, I trust you'll find a way to help them directly. I've given all I can and I'm done. Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke, his tone was cooler. I see. Well, I'll let Nathan know we've spoken. Good day, Maggie. I hung up, my hands shaking, and looked at Lauren. She was pale, her eyes away. You didn't have to do that, she said. My dad, he doesn't take kindly to being turned down. I'm not here to please your dad, I said, softer than I felt. I'm here to do what's right for me and for Nathan, even if he can't see it yet. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. I'm sorry, Maggie, for everything, for not telling you sooner, for making you feel like you didn't matter. Her apology caught me off guard, a small crack in the wall between us. I wanted to believe her, but the hurt was still too raw. Thank you, I said, my voice quiet. But sorry doesn't fix what's broken. Nathan needs help, Lauren. Real help. I know, she whispered. I'm trying. I just don't know how. I left the diner with my head spinning, the taste of coffee bitter on my tongue. The sun was higher now, drying the puddles on Main Street, but I felt like I was walking through a storm. I drove home, the familiar streets of Clifton blurring past. Kids riding bikes, flags still up from the 4th, the hardware store with its hand-painted sign, but nothing felt familiar anymore. Nathan, my boy, was drowning in an addiction I hadn't seen, and I'd been feeding it without knowing. That evening, I was in the garden, pulling weeds just to keep my hands busy, when I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked up to see Nathan, his face tight with anger, striding toward me. He was in jeans and a wrinkled polo, his hair messy, nothing like the polished son-in-law Charles Bennett expected. "Mom," he said, his voice sharp. "What the hell's going on? Lauren says you're done paying the mortgage, and now her dad's calling me, saying we're embarrassing the family. What are you doing?" I stood, brushing dirt from my hands, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Nathan, I know about the gambling. Lauren told me everything. The poker, the betting, the money I sent. Going to your debts. You need help, sweetheart, not more money." His face went red, his eyes flashing. "Gambling? Is that what she's calling it?" "I'm investing, Mom. I've got a system. And yeah, I've hit some rough patches, but I'm not an addict." "You're blowing this out of proportion." "Investing?" I echoed, my voice rising despite myself. "Is that what you call losing thousands of dollars at casinos? Taking out loans behind Lauren's back?" "Nathan, I've been working myself sick to keep your house, and you've been throwing it away." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a caged animal. "You don't get it, do you? I'm trying to build something, to be someone. Lauren's family expects things, big things, and I'm doing what I have to. You always said you'd support me, Mom. Now you're pulling the rug out?" I felt like I'd been slapped, his words cutting deeper than Lauren's ever had. I stepped closer, my voice low but firm. "Nathan, I've supported you my whole life. I worked nights, skipped meals, gave up my dreams so you could have yours. But I can't save you from this. You need help, a program, a counselor, something. I love you, but I can't keep paying for your mistakes." He stared at me, his jaw tight, then shook his head. "Fine. If that's how you feel, we'll figure it out ourselves. But don't expect me to come running back when you change your mind." He turned, stormed back to his car, and peeled out of the driveway, leaving me standing in the garden, the air thick with the scent of earth and regret. I sank onto the grass, the weeds soft under my hands, and let the tears come. The apple tree loomed above me, its branches heavy with unripe fruit. And I thought of the garden I'd let go, the life I'd let go. I'd tried to tend Nathan's dreams, but they'd grown wild, choking out everything else. Now, with the truth laid bare, I saw it clearly. My love hadn't saved him. It had enabled him, and it had cost me more than I could bear. But even in that pain, there was a flicker of something new. Resolve, maybe, or the stubborn hope of those wildflowers pushing through the dirt. I couldn't fix Nathan, but I could start tending my own garden, my own life. The road ahead would be hard. More fights, more truths, more choices I wasn't ready for. But for the first time, I felt like I was choosing me. The summer sun was softer now, the kind that paints the world in gold rather than burning it dry. It was late August, and I was kneeling in the backyard of my little house on Cedar Lane, Clifton, Ohio, my hands deep in the earth, pulling weeds from around the old apple tree. The garden had been a tangle of neglect for years, but lately, I'd started tending it again, coaxing life back into the soil. I'm Maggie Harper, and if you'd told me a month ago I'd be out here, dirt under my nails and a quiet hope in my chest, I'd have thought you were dreaming. After the 4th of July, when I learned my son Nathan was gambling away the money I'd sacrificed for his mortgage, I thought my heart might never mend. But life, like this garden, has a way of surprising you with new growth, even when you've given up on it. It started small, the way most good things do. A week after Nathan stormed out of my driveway, accusing me of ruining his life, I was sweeping the porch when Susan Carter, my neighbor across the street, waved me over. Susan's lived on Cedar Lane as long as I have, but we'd never been more than nodding acquaintances, always too busy with our own lives. She was standing in her front yard, her grey hair tied back with a bandana, pruning her rose bushes with a pair of clippers that looked older than both of us. "Maggie, you got a minute?" she called, her voice carrying that easy warmth you find in folks who've weathered their share of storms. "I'm starting a garden club, just a few of us neighbors. Thought you might want to join. Your backyard could use some love." I hesitated, glancing at my overgrown mess of a garden. "I don't know, Susan. I haven't touched a trowel in years. I'd probably kill anything I planted." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "That's what makes it fun. We're all learning together. Come on, Maggie. It's just dirt and dreams. What do you say? Something about her smile, or maybe the way the roses bloom so fiercely behind her, made me nod. All right, I said. I'll give it a try. That Saturday, I showed up at Susan's with a pair of gloves and no idea what I was doing. There were 4 of us. Susan, me, Nancy Reynolds from the library, and old Mr. Thompson, who mostly came for the lemonade. Susan handed me a packet of rose seeds, her eyes twinkling. Start with these, Maggie. Roses are tough like us. They'll bloom if you give them half a chance. We spent the morning digging, planting, laughing over spilled soil and crooked rows. Nancy, who'd been my friend since our kids were in diapers, told stories about her grandkids, her voice soft as the breeze. You know, Maggie, she said, patting my arm, it's good to see you out here. You've been carrying too much for too long. I smiled, but her words stuck with me like a seed taking root. For years, I'd carried Nathan's dreams, his house, his life, until I'd forgotten how to carry my own. That day, kneeling in Susan's yard, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't in ages. Joy, simple and unasked for, like the wildflowers that had pushed through my garden's weeds. Back home, I started working on my own yard, clearing the brambles, pruning the apple tree, planting those rose seeds Susan gave me. It was slow work, my back aching from years of hospital shifts. But every weed I pulled felt like clearing space in my heart. I'd sit on the porch afterward, a glass of iced tea sweating in my hand, and watch the sunset paint the sky in pinks and oranges. Clifton was quiet in those moments, the hum of cicadas mixing with the distant clang of a neighbor's wind chimes, and I'd think, maybe this is what living feels like again. Then there was David Sullivan. Dr. Sullivan, David, as he'd asked me to call him outside work, had been a steady presence at Clifton General for years. A widower with kind eyes and a laugh that made the nurses smile even on the worst shifts. We'd shared countless coffees in the break room, talking about everything from hospital gossip to the novels we'd read. But I'd always kept him at arm's length, too focused on Nathan to think about anything else. Lately, though, he'd been stopping by my station more, his smile lingering a little longer. One evening, as I was finishing a shift, he caught me in the hallway, his white coat slung over his arm. Maggie, hi, he said, his voice warm. The town's putting on a concert in the park this weekend. Bluegrass, I think. Any chance you'd like to go with me? I blinked, caught off guard. A concert? David, I haven't been to one in... Well, I don't know how long. All the more reason to come, he said, his eyes crinkling. It's just music and fireflies. No pressure. What do you say? I felt a flutter, like a butterfly waking up in my chest. All right, I said, smiling despite myself. But don't laugh if I don't know the songs. The concert was magical, the kind of night that makes you believe in second chances. We sat on a blanket in Clifton Park, the grass cool under us, the air alive with fiddles and banjos. Families sprawled out around us, kids chasing fireflies, couples swaying to the music. David handed me a lemonade, his fingers brushing mine. And we talked, really talked, about our lives, our losses, EVA'S, the dreams we'd tucked away. You know, Maggie, he said, his voice low under the music. You've got this quiet strength. I've always admired it. Makes me think there's still time for new beginnings. I looked at him, the fireflies dancing in the dark, and felt my heart open, just a little. I'm starting to think that too, David, I said, my voice soft. Maybe we both are. That night, as he walked me to my car, he leaned in, his lips brushing my cheek in a kiss so gentle it felt like a promise. Good night, Maggie, he said, his smile lighting up the dark. I drove home, the radio playing an old James Taylor song, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. But life, as I've learned, doesn't let you bloom without a few storms. It was a humid morning in early September when Lauren showed up at my door, her eyes red, a duffel bag slung over her shoulder. I hadn't heard from her since our talk at the Main Street diner, when she'd told me about Nathan's gambling. She looked smaller somehow, her usual polish gone, her hair in a messy ponytail. Maggie, she said, her voice cracking. I didn't know where else to go. Can I stay here, just for a few days? I stepped back, my mind racing. Lauren, the woman who'd sent me away from her barbecue, who'd let me pour my savings into Nathan's addiction, was standing on my porch, asking for help. Part of me wanted to shut the door, to protect the fragile peace I'd started building. But another part, the part that remembered her tears at the diner, saw a woman as lost as I'd been. "Come in," I said, holding the door open. "Let's talk." We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Nathan had done his homework, where I'd cried after James died. Lauren clutched a mug of tea I'd made, her hands trembling. "Nathan found out I told you about the gambling," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone saw us at the diner and mentioned it to him. He was furious, Maggie. He came home last night screaming, throwing things. Said I betrayed him, that I'm just like you trying to control him." I packed a bag and left. I felt a chill, my heart aching for her and for Nathan, who was slipping further away. "Did he hurt you?" I asked, my voice steady despite the fear. "Not physically," she said quickly, "but the things he said, he threatened to tell my parents everything if I didn't fix it, if I didn't get you to start paying again. I told him I wouldn't do it, that even if you did, it wouldn't help. That's when he lost it. I can't go back, Maggie. Not now." I leaned back, the chair creaking under me, and studied her. Lauren had always been a wall between us, her polished exterior keeping me at a distance. But now, stripped of that armor, she was just a woman, scared and searching for a way out. "Lauren," I said, choosing my words carefully, "you can stay here as long as you need. The guest room's small, nothing fancy, but it's yours. But you need to face this. Nathan's addiction, your marriage, all of it. Running won't fix what's broken." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I know. I'm trying, Maggie. I'm so sorry for how I treated you, for making you feel like you didn't belong. I was so caught up in keeping up appearances, in being the perfect daughter, the perfect wife, I lost sight of what matters." Her apology was a balm, soothing a wound I hadn't realized was still bleeding. I reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "We're family, Lauren, even after everything. We'll figure this out together, but you have to do your part." She squeezed back, a small, grateful smile breaking through. "Thank you, Maggie. I don't deserve this. Nobody deserves to be alone in a storm," I said, thinking of my own lonely nights. "Let's start there." That evening, I called Susan to let her know I'd missed the next garden club meeting. "Lauren's staying with me," I explained, keeping it vague. "She's going through something." Susan didn't pry, just said, "You're a good woman, Maggie Harper. Bring her along when she's ready. We've got plenty of dirt to share." I laughed, the sound surprising me. "I'll keep that in mind." Over the next few days, Lauren settled into the guest room, a tiny space with a quilt I'd made for Nathan's high school graduation and a window overlooking the garden. She was quiet, spending hours on the phone with a therapist she'd found, or sitting on the porch with a book she barely read. I didn't push her, just kept the kettle on and the kitchen open, the way my mama used to when I needed comfort. One afternoon, as we shelled peas at the table, the air thick with the scent of summer, she looked at me, her eyes clearer than they'd been. "Maggie," she said, "how do you do it? Keep going. I mean, after everything." I set down a pod, thinking, I don't always know. I admitted, but I'm learning that loving yourself isn't selfish. It's like planting a garden. You have to tend your own soil before you can help anything else grow. She nodded, her fingers stilling. I want to learn that too. That night, I sat on the porch, a glass of iced tea in hand, the cicadas singing their endless song. The roses I'd planted were starting to bud, small but stubborn, and the apple tree looked stronger, its leaves catching the last light. I thought of Nathan, still lost in his addiction, and Lauren, taking her first shaky steps toward truth, and I thought of myself. Maggie Harper, a woman who'd spent decades giving, now learning to receive friendship from Susan and Nancy, kindness from David, even the fragile trust of a daughter-in-law I'd thought I'd lost. The road ahead was uncertain. Nathan might fight harder, or he might fall further. Lauren's path was her own to walk, and I had my own fears to face about love, about aging, about starting over. But for the first time, I felt like I was planting seeds for myself, not just for others. And in the quiet of that summer night, with the stars peeking through the Ohio sky. I believed those seeds might just bloom. The first frost of autumn touched Clifton, Ohio, in late September, leaving a shimmer on the grass outside my little house on Cedar Lane. I stood at the kitchen window, a mug of chamomile tea warming my hands, watching the roses I'd planted in the summer hold their own against the chill. Their petals were still bright, stubborn in the face of change, and I couldn't help but smile. I'm Maggie Harper, and these past few months, I've learned that life, like those roses, can bloom even after the hardest seasons. Learning Nathan, my son, was lost to a gambling addiction broke my heart, but it also woke me up. I'd spent years giving everything to him, only to find myself empty, now with new friends, a budding romance, and even a fragile bond with my daughter-in-law Lauren. I was starting to fill that emptiness with something new myself, but healing, I've found, isn't a straight path. It's a winding road, full of stumbles and surprises, and it asks you to face the things you'd rather leave buried. That autumn, as the leaves turned gold and the air smelled of wood smoke, I faced Nathan again, not just as his mother, but as a woman who'd learned to set boundaries. And in doing so, I found a way to forgive not just him, but myself. It started on a crisp Saturday morning, when the doorbell rang while I was kneading dough for biscuits. Lauren was still staying in my guest room, her things neatly tucked into the small space. Though she'd started looking at apartments in town, she was at the library with Nancy. So I wiped flour from my hands and opened the door, expecting Susan with more garden club plans. Instead, there was Nathan, his face pale, his eyes shadowed with a weariness I hadn't seen before. He wore a faded hoodie, his hands stuffed in the pockets, looking more like the boy I'd raised than the angry man who'd stormed out of my garden weeks ago. "Mom," he said, his voice rough, like he hadn't slept. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, my heart caught between love and caution. The last time we'd spoken, he'd accused me of betraying him, of pulling the rug out from under his life. But something in his eyes, something soft, almost broken, made me step back. "Come in, sweetheart," I said, holding the door open. "I was just making biscuits. You want some coffee?" He nodded, following me to the kitchen. The table was dusted with flour, the air warm with the scent of baking. I poured him a mug, black like he always took it, and we sat, the silence heavy between us. I waited, letting him find his words, the way I used to when he was a teenager, brooding over some schoolyard fight. "I messed up, Mom," he finally said, staring into his coffee. "Big time. I lost everything. The house is going into foreclosure. Lauren's leaving me. And last week, I borrowed money from her parents, swore I'd pay it back, and I gambled it all away. Every cent." His words landed like stones, each one sinking deeper. I'd known his gambling was bad, but hearing it from him, raw and unfiltered, made it real in a way Lauren's confession hadn't. I wanted to reach for him, to hold the boy who'd once clung to me during asthma attacks. But I stayed still, my hands wrapped around my mug. "Nathan," I said, my voice steady, "why are you telling me this now?" He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "Because I hit bottom. That's what they call it. Right, I was at a casino 2 nights ago, down to my last dollar. And I realized, I don't want to be this person anymore. I called a hotline. Mom, they gave me a number for Gamblers Anonymous. I went to a meeting yesterday. It's hard, but I'm trying." I felt a rush of relief, mixed with a grief I couldn't name. My boy was trying, but the road he'd chosen had left scars on him, on Lauren, on me. "I'm proud of you for that," I said, meaning it. "But Nathan, you've got a long way to go. You've hurt people, not just with money, but with your choices." Lauren's scared. "I'm hurt. You need to own that." He nodded, his jaw tight. "I know. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything. For taking your money, for letting Lauren push you away, for not being the son you deserved. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I needed you to know I'm trying to change. His apology was like a breeze through an open window, stirring things I'd kept locked away. I reached across the table, touching his hand, his skin warm under mine. "Nathan, you're my son, and nothing will ever change that. I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. You need to keep going to those meetings. Get help. Rebuild what you've broken. I'll be here, but I can't carry you anymore." He squeezed my hand, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I don't want you to carry me. Mom, I want to make this right." We sat there, the biscuits cooling on the counter, the kitchen quiet except for the hum of the fridge. It wasn't a perfect moment, too much had been broken for that, but it was a start, a seed planted in soil we'd both have to tend. Lauren's journey was different, but just as winding. She came home from the library that afternoon, her arms full of books on addiction and self-help, her face brighter than it had been in weeks. Over dinner, chicken casserole. The kind my mama used to make. She told me she'd found a therapist who specialized in codependency. "I've been enabling Nathan," she said, poking at her plate, trying to keep up appearances, pretending everything was fine. "I need to figure out why I did that, why I cared so much about what my parents think." I nodded, passing her the green beans. "That's a brave step. Lauren, facing yourself is harder than facing anyone else." She looked at me, her eyes searching. "You've done it, haven't you? Faced yourself, I mean. How do you keep going?" I smiled, thinking of the roses outside, the way they'd bloomed despite my doubts. "One day at a time, honey. You plant something, you water it, you wait. Some days, it feels like nothing's growing. But then you see a bud, and you know it's worth it." A week later, Lauren found an apartment downtown, a small studio above the bookstore on Main Street. She packed her things, folding the quilt I'd given her like it was a treasure. "Maggie," she said, standing in the guest room doorway, "I can't thank you enough for letting me stay. You didn't have to, not after how I treated you. Your family," I said, my voice soft. "Even if things change, that doesn't. You'll be okay. Lauren, you're stronger than you think." She hugged me, her arms tight, and I felt a warmth I hadn't expected. "I'm filing for divorce," she said, pulling back. "It's not what I wanted, but it's what I need. I hope we can still be in each other's lives." "I'd like that," I said, meaning it. "Come by for dinner any time. The door's always open." As Lauren rebuilt her life, I found myself drawn to a new purpose. Nancy, who'd been volunteering at the community center, invited me to a support group for families of addicts. "It's a small group," she said over coffee at the diner, her eyes kind. "Just folks like us, trying to make sense of loving someone who's hurting themselves. You've got a story to share, Maggie." I was nervous, but I went. The community center was a low brick building near the park, its meeting room smelling of coffee and lemon cleaner. About a dozen people sat in a circle, their faces etched with the kind of quiet strength that comes from surviving pain. There was a farmer whose son was hooked on cards, a teacher whose sister bet her savings on slots, a grandmother who'd lost her house to her husband's debts. I listened, my hands clasped in my lap, as they shared their stories, anger, guilt, hope, all tangled together. When it was my turn, I took a deep breath, the words coming slow at first. "I'm Maggie," I said. "My son, Nathan, is a gambler. For 3 years. I paid his mortgage, thinking I was helping him build a life. I worked nights, skipped meals, gave up my retirement savings. Then I found out he was betting it all away. I stopped the payments, and it's been the hardest thing I've ever done. I felt like I was abandoning him, like I'd failed as a mother. But I'm learning that loving him means letting him face his choices, even if it breaks my heart." The room was quiet, but their nods, their understanding eyes, wrapped around me like a quilt. The grandmother, her hair white as snow, reached for my hand. "You're not alone," she said, "and you're not failing. You're giving him a chance to grow." That group became a lifeline. I went every week, sharing my fears, my small victories, listening to theirs. I started speaking more, offering comfort, helping new members feel less alone. One evening, As we sipped coffee after a meeting, the group leader asked if I'd lead a session someday. "You've got a way of making people feel seen." "Maggie," she said, "your story's powerful." I blushed, shaking my head. "I'm just a nurse who's made a lot of mistakes." "You're more than that," she said, smiling. "You're proof that we can start over, no matter how old we are." Her words stayed with me, like a melody I couldn't forget. I thought about them as I walked home. The streets of Clifton quiet under a harvest moon, the air crisp with the promise of fall. The town was gearing up for the Labor Day fair, with posters taped to lampposts and the diner advertising pumpkin pie specials. My roses were still blooming, their scent mingling with the wood smoke, and I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I'd faced Nathan, forgiven him, and set boundaries that protected us both. I'd opened my home to Lauren, not out of duty, but out of a love that had grown stronger for being honest. And I'd found a way to turn my pain into something that helped others. A garden of sorts, blooming in the community centre's meeting room. David Sullivan was part of that piece too. We'd been seeing each other more, sharing dinners at the Ivy Room or walks in the park, where the leaves crunched under our feet. One evening, as we sat on a bench watching kids play tag, he took my hand, his fingers warm against mine. "Maggie," he said, his voice low, "you've changed these past few months. You're lighter, like you're carrying less." I smiled, leaning into him. I've been letting go of things I thought I had to hold on to. It's scary, but it feels right." He squeezed my hand, his eyes crinkling. "It looks good on you. Makes me want to stick around, see where this goes." I laughed, the sound surprising me. "I'd like that, David. I really would." As I sat on my porch that night, a quilt over my knees, the stars bright above Clifton, I thought about the woman I'd been last 4th of July, exhausted, invisible, pouring herself into a life that didn't see her. Now, I was planting new seeds, not just in my garden, but in my heart. Nathan was fighting his way back. Lauren was finding her strength. And I was building a life that felt like mine. The road wasn't finished. There'd be more hard days, more choices to make, but I was ready to walk it, one step at a time, with roses blooming at my side. The 4th of July came around again, and the air in Clifton, Ohio, was thick with the promise of celebration. From my porch on Cedar Lane, I could see flags fluttering on every lamppost, hear the laughter of kids chasing each other with sparklers, and smell the smoky sweetness of barbecues firing up. My backyard was ready, the roses I'd planted last summer now bursting with color, their petals catching the late afternoon sun. The old apple tree stood proud, its branches heavy with fruit, and a wooden table was set with a checkered cloth. Pitchers of lemonade, and a tray of my mama's ginger cookies. I'm Maggie Harper. And a year ago, I stood on my son Nathan's porch, turned away from his 4th of July party, my heart breaking under the weight of sacrifices that went unseen. Tonight, I was hosting my own gathering, not to prove anything, but to celebrate the life I'd reclaimed, the people who'd helped me find it, and the truth that even at 62, you can light up your own sky. It's funny how a year can change everything. Last summer, I cancelled the mortgage payments I'd been making for Nathan and Lauren's house in Silver Pines, a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. I learned Nathan was gambling away my savings, that Lauren had hidden it to protect her family's image, and that I'd become a stranger in their world. But that pain, sharp as it was, woke me up. I started tending my garden, my heart, my life, with the help of friends like Susan Carter and Nancy Reynolds, and a man named David Sullivan, whose kind eyes reminded me I was still worth seeing. I forgave Nathan, welcomed Lauren through her own storm, and found a way to turn my story into hope for others. Tonight, as the sun dipped low, I stood in my yard, ready to share this new chapter with the people who mattered most. Susan was the first to arrive, her arms full of a peach cobbler, still warm from the oven. "Maggie Harper," she said, setting it on the table. This yard looks like something out of a magazine. Those roses are stealing the show. I laughed, brushing dirt from my apron. They're stubborn, like me. Thanks for the cobbler. Susan, it smells like heaven. Nancy came next, her husband Tom in tow, carrying a cooler of iced tea and a stack of paper plates. We brought reinforcements, she said, hugging me tight. Maggie, this is going to be a night to remember. My sister Linda drove in from Ohio. Her new boyfriend, Carl, a quiet man with a warm smile, helping her carry a basket of sweet corn. Barb, she said, using my old nickname. I swear, you look 10 years younger. This place is glowing. It's the roses, I teased, but her words warmed me. Linda and I had grown closer this year, our phone calls stretching late into the night. Rebuilding a bond I'd let slip in my years of focusing on Nathan. Lauren arrived just as the sky turned pink, her blonde hair loose, a small potted herb in her hands. She'd moved into her studio apartment above the bookstore on Main Street, started a marketing job at a local firm, and was navigating the messy end of her marriage to Nathan. Maggie, she said, setting the herb on the table. This is basil. I grew it myself. A thank you for everything. I hugged her, the scent of her shampoo mixing with the roses. It's perfect. Lauren, I'm glad you're here. Nathan was the last to show, his steps hesitant as he walked through the gate. He'd been attending Gamblers Anonymous for months, working with a counselor to tackle the mountain of debt he'd built. His face was still thin, his eyes carrying the weight of his choices. But there was a spark there, a flicker of the boy who'd once waved a flag and called fireworks magic. Mom, he said, his voice soft. Thanks for inviting me. You're always welcome here. Sweetheart, I said, touching his arm. Always. David Sullivan arrived with a flourish, carrying a chocolate pie from the bakery on Main Street and a bottle of sparkling cider. I figured we'd need something to toast with, he said, his eyes crinkling as he kissed my cheek. Maggie, you've outdone yourself. I blushed, feeling like a girl again. It's just a backyard. David, but it's ours. The evening unfolded like a song, each note building on the last. We filled our plates with grilled chicken, corn on the cob, Susan's cobbler, and my cookies. The table alive with laughter and stories. Susan told a hilarious tale about her disastrous attempt at online dating, waving her fork for emphasis. This guy showed up in flip-flops. Maggie, to a steakhouse. Flip-flops. I swear. I'm sticking to roses from now on. Nancy chuckled, nudging Tom. You're lucky I didn't have Tinder back in the day. Linda shared news of her grandkids, her face glowing with pride, while Carl, usually quiet, surprised us with a story about his days as a volunteer firefighter. Nathan listened, a small smile playing on his lips, and I caught him glancing at Lauren, a mix of regret and hope in his eyes. Lauren, for her part, was lighter than I'd ever seen her, laughing at Susan's jokes, passing the lemonade like she belonged here. As the sky darkened, we lit sparklers, the kids from the neighborhood joining us, their giggles filling the air. David handed me a sparkler, his fingers lingering on mine. You're something else. Maggie Harper, he said, his voice low. This night, this place, it's magic. I smiled, the sparkler casting a glow on his face. It's not magic, David. It's just people, coming together. When the town's fireworks started, we gathered in the yard, blankets spread on the grass, the roses framing us like a picture. The sky exploded in red, white, and blue, each burst echoing in my chest. I looked around at Nathan, sitting cross-legged, his face softer than it had been in years. At Lauren, her eyes bright with possibility. At Susan and Nancy, who'd pulled me out of my darkness. At Linda, my sister, who'd reminded me family is more than one person. And at David, whose hand found mine, steady and warm. This was my family, not the one I'd planned, but the one I'd grown. Through pain and love and stubborn hope, Nathan caught my eye, standing to join me at the edge of the yard. Mom, he said, his voice barely audible over the booms. I'm sorry for last year. For everything. I know I've got a long way to go, but I'm trying. For you. For me. I touched his cheek, the way I used to when he was small. You're doing it. Nathan. That's what matters. I love you, always will. He hugged me, his arms tight, and I felt a piece of my heart settle. Not healed, but held. Lauren joined us, her basil plant sitting proudly on the table. Maggie, she said, her voice steady, you gave me a home when I didn't deserve one. I'm starting over, and it's because of you. I squeezed her hand, my throat tight. You're starting over because of you. Lauren, I just opened the door. As the final fireworks faded, I stood with David, his arm around me, the night cool against my skin. I thought of the woman I'd been a year ago, standing on Nathan's porch, my potato salad left to wilt, my heart breaking under the weight of being unseen. I'd cancelled those payments, faced the truth of Nathan's addiction, and learned to love myself not instead of others, but alongside them. I'd planted roses, built friendships, fallen in love, and turned my pain into a story that helped others at the community center. I wasn't the same Maggie, and I didn't want to be. This Maggie, with dirt under her nails and a spark in her heart, was enough. I looked up at the sky, the stars peeking through the smoke, and thought of the fireworks from that night a year ago. How they'd lit up my loneliness. Now they lit something else, hope. Not just for me, but for Nathan. Fighting his way back, for Lauren. Building a life on her own terms, for all of us. Gathered here, choosing love over fear. Life, I'd learned, is like a firework, it fades. But if you're brave enough to light it again, it can shine brighter than you ever imagined. I turned to David, his face soft in the starlight. You know, I said, I used to think my story was about being Nathan's mom. Now I think it's about being Maggie. He smiled, pulling me closer. And Maggie's a hell of a story. As the night wound down, the yard quiet, the table littered with crumbs and empty glasses, I felt a peace that had nothing to do with perfection and everything to do with truth. I'd cancelled a mortgage, yes, but I'd given myself something more, a life rooted in love, not obligation, in growth, not sacrifice. And as I stood there, the roses blooming, the stars above, I knew I'd keep tending this garden, keep lighting my own sparks, for as long as I had breath. If you've followed my story this far, I hope it's touched you, maybe reminded you of your own sparks waiting to shine. This is where my tale ends for now, but I believe every one of us has a firework inside, ready to light up the dark. If you found yours, or if you're still searching, I'd love to hear about it. Click that subscribe button and share your story in the comments. What's the moment that changed you? That made you choose yourself? Let's sit together like friends in this old kitchen and share the light we found. Because I know, deep down, we're all made for moments like these.